Well, welcome
So,
again to another session of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Hales, and the moderator. We have with us Todd Conaway, who's an instructional designer at the University of Washington Bothell campus. And prior to that, spent 10 years doing the same thing at Yavapai College in Arizona. And prior to that, he taught high school English for 10 years at a small private school. And as we were talking, he's able to combine his passion for the outdoors and digital tools. And Todd's going to talk about what happened to my community. So, Todd, take it away.
okay. Well, thank you very much. And this is super exciting. How this is the strangest thing ever to have an audience of people from my former workplace. How wonderful. You're going to see pictures of people who are still gainfully employed right there at Yavapai College. Um, one of the things I will say, I'm just going to tell you a story that has happened to me over about uh, 25 years or thereabouts of being a teacher in a small school, being an instructional designer at a small school, and then being an instructional designer at a small university. And the one word that is common through all that is small. I prefer that space, whether it's a classroom or a gathering of people. I love to go to concerts, but I would rather sit in a very small place and watch the same musician. I like it at yoga when there's more room in the room to move around and packed mats, all one right next to each other. Um, but I love the people, but I just like smaller groups. And so that's going to be part of this story. And I think it fits into the story in that I honestly feel like the best work I've ever done as a teacher or an instructional designer has been more along the lines of, I'll use this loosely, but something like inspiration rather than like, here's the fix to this problem, or here's the solution. Uh, and I feel like what I learned through those relationships is that the learning doesn't end. It carries on through the length of a relationship, and that trust is built on those kind of time spent together, being present for other people, and having some amount of competence that allows those other people to trust you, right? I don't mean to ignore expertise or in any way, but I do think that um, there is something about building relationships in my work with students and faculty that is like more helpful than my expertise at something. Um, so, so that's kind of my background, small relationship driven work. And I feel super lucky that I've been very supported in that in all the places that I've worked because I do know of instructional designers who are kind of more corporate style work where the subject matter expert comes in, they give you a bunch of content, you move it around, reshape it, and turn it into a class that gets taught by part-time faculty. I mean, that's the reality of some instructional designer work. Mine is not that, and it never, thankful for me, it never has been. Um, so that's kind of the background to the story I'm about to tell you. And I'm going to share this. I'll give you the link to this later, but I'm just going to share this with you so I can kind of walk through this story uh, with you here, and you'll have some visual representations of some of the things. Um, so COVID and Twitter play a deep role in the early part of this story. I was a good Twitter user. I had a deep community built around teaching in Twitter. Um, you know, had I had the foresight 2 years ago to really picture what was happening today, it's possible I would have bailed out of Twitter long before it was reformed as the new X or whatever. But along with many others, right around COVID, a little after it started, people left Twitter, and particularly people in my community of Twitter. That combined with COVID and the workplace were really difficult for somebody who likes to have small groups and have relationships with people, right? On one hand, and Carol, Sarika, you guys can maybe picture this. I worked on the Verde campus, which was about 50 miles or less from the Prescott campus. But I was using Skype daily back in like 2007 to communicate with the people at the other campus. And so the idea of Zoom and video conferencing was not new to me, but I believe even then it was very clear that it was not the same thing as being with somebody in a physical space. And it's not. I mean, that's the truth. It's just not that. But there are parts of that physical space that are incredibly valuable to Todd. And so my story started back as a person who really valued groups and group work and relationships. And then these two things happened that kind of unsettled my ability to be in those spaces. And that's where this starts. So I'm going to share a little bit about things I've done and seen here. And I just kind of scroll down this. And like I said, I'll share this with you at the end of the presentation. So COVID and remote work were like devastating to me. I felt like everybody that I used to go visit in their offices, the people I'd have coffee with, the people I'd take walks with, just weren't there. And we all suffered that, right? I mean, that was crazy. We're still suffering, as far as I can tell. And it just made me really sad because, as this picture represents, this is what in my pea brain, this is what I wanted of faculty development. This was a group of people, educators in the Phoenix area, who'd been meeting monthly at various bars to just talk about anything. And it always seemed to come around to something related to teaching. Oftentimes, people brought their laptops and would play with technology. But this, like an hour and a half to get to these events, it was truly the best professional development I ever got. And I was going to conferences right and left and presenting at conferences and hanging out with people. This is what it was. It was friendship surrounded by this fuzzy thing called work, I guess. And I met so many people in the field of higher education that are just brilliant. And I'll show you, and this plays into some of the later stories here. But it was called the Cyber Salon. It was just a great event. It was so exciting that I actually started one in the Verde Valley, and we met in Prescott on occasion. And it was super successful for like 3 years. The one in Phoenix had been going on for, it probably lasted like 10 years. I mean, how many things last that long in, like Bob's conference here has lasted that long. It's rare. I mean, it's very rare that you get a community like that. Another piece of my Twitter landscape that was valuable to me was something that was a class called DS 106. It was a digital storytelling class, or is a digital storytelling class. I kind of was an overachiever early on in that class. I never paid any money to do it. Well, that's not true. My license plate cost extra money. The t-shirts I bought cost extra money. But it was a community of students and teachers around digital tools that were used in academia. Um, as you can see from this picture here, I'm at Exit 106. I'm wearing a DS 106 shirt with a DS 106 license plate on the car. Um, I definitely am still into that community. And again, it really impacted a lot of how I learned about teaching, how I learned about tools in teaching. And that's kind of between the in-person professional development and the Twitter community that had grown to just a really healthy landscape for me, all of that sort of disappeared. I did make it to Scotland one time to visit people in that class. That was pretty amazing. Who would guess, right? Um, but it kind of fell apart. And while my mom was a family therapist for her most of her life, and I don't really appreciate grief. I know I was full of grief when COVID struck and Twitter left, and my kids were going to Zoom school. It was really rough. Uh, and even as the pandemic started to lift and people were coming back to school to work on campus, a lot of them were not here as often. A lot of them were working from home 2 or 3 or 4 days a week. And uh, I'm going to show you hopefully this little clip of video that's like 12 seconds long. There's no audio to it, but it walks through a place that I had worked really hard to build and create. I bought the plants. I bought the original frames in this office space. If this doesn't play really well for you right here, I'll share it in the link, but it's really short and it should work. But when I arrived here, and I'm literally still right there, I'm in one of the rooms you'll see here. It was not very nice looking. I'll say that. But every room had people in it. Every single door was an office with a person that was there 5 days a week. For better or worse, there were humans in that space. Yesterday, I literally, right here in this place you're going to see in this video, I was the only person anywhere near all this because I walk to work, which is an interesting thing in this day and age. Back in Clarkdale, when I lived in Clarkdale, I could walk to work. For years, when I was a high school English teacher, I could walk to work. For some reason, that's kind of been something useful to me. But anyway, here's how nice this place is, right? It's got books, plants. All the posters were teaching and learning related, except a few that were kind of Pacific Northwest. But this is all empty offices. All of these offices are empty. This office, which is my office today, used to have 4 people in it. For like a year and a half, it literally just had me in it, and it was brutal. Can you guys see that? Did that play okay on your end? Yeah. So anyway, there I was sitting there all by myself, and now is for the happy part, right? So I'm sorry about the whining and complaining, but that was really difficult for me. And so the good part of this story is that I have found ways to overcome some of this, and that's what this is really about. And I feel like today, 4-ish years later, I really am making some progress. In fact, one of the last things I'm going to show you here is really remarkable, and it speaks to both the internet connection and the love of kind of sitting down around a table with people. So let's get on to some happier stuff. But that's where this presentation came from. I've done this now for probably 2 years or so in various places, and It was super traumatic to me to lose kind of my connections online, at least in that vehicle, the Twitter, and then just people weren't around. So one of the things that I have been a part of here on this campus was a group called Teaching and Learning on the Open Web. And we originated here about the time I started, about 9 years ago, as a funded learning community. So everybody got like a couple $100 to buy books or something, and it was supported by the Teaching and Learning Center. That lasted for about 2 years. They stopped that program, but every month since then, this group has met, and we are small. There's like 12 of us, and sometimes only 4 people show up, but it's a community, and we have a place that represents our work and the things we have done. That community, the email exchanges, the then walks to get a coffee with some of the people, and the monthly meetings, honestly, was just a lifesaver for me. It still is. It's if I had to pick a single thing that I'm proud of that I've done here at this campus, uh, keeping this sort of together. I'm in no way like I'm not a leader of it. I'm not the president of the club. I just sort of send a couple emails every once in a while, um, and the group is still together. Every month we meet. It's pretty amazing. Um, and so here is kind of my idea. Number one is to start a community. And I'm going to give you an example here of one that I started about probably 4 years ago now. This was not long after 2020 when the pandemic hit. I knew I was going to need this sense of community, and I'd long thought about creating like an instructional designers association, but regional, right? Because I know a lot of people in my field in this area, but I hardly ever see them, save a conference here or there. And I thought it would be great to create a website where people could share the work that they do. So I created a website called Pacific North, it was pinwids.com. The link will be in this link I have. And then I lost interest. So this was, and literally for like 2 years, the site just sat there. I added a few things that I thought were really interesting. On March 5th in 2023, totally out of the blue, some guy who works nearby posted to it. And I thought that was great, kind of almost re-energized me. But then nothing else happened. Then I finally went to a conference up here in Washington where I stood in front of like 100 people and I showed them this site. It was like one of those 6-minute presentation things or fast 20-minute presentation. And I had little cards for everybody with the URL and a description. I gave all these 100 people these cards at this conference, and I'm like, we're going to have monthly meetings. You can show up and we'll talk about instructional design. Nobody showed up for months, like 3 or 4 months after that. I would wait there by myself in Zoom. I'm going to skip ahead because there is a happy part to this. Last month, people I've never met showed up. So that's a huge win. I'll get to that here in a minute. But my point here, and this will be again kind of as an example here later on, you really got to just reach out to people if you want to find community. You can't wait for the, and I've learned this with faculty, right? They're not going to come to me. They're sitting in their office, like clicking things right and left and doing stuff. And I need to reach out to my people, but my constituents, my customer base. So create a community. That's and it can work or not, but you got to try. I have really intentionally reached out to different people here of late, people I met long ago via email just to say hi, see if they want to talk. And that has actually been super helpful. So another idea here is to take an existing community and reshape it. And so one of the things that happened with that teaching and learning on the open website group was that we had done all of the things that learning communities do. We'd read books, we'd read articles, we'd shared tools, we'd met in person, we'd met on Zoom, we had did book clubs. We'd gone on little excursions on a weekend together. We'd just done all these things because we've been together for now 8 years. But at the beginning of COVID, we'd already been together for like 4 years. We didn't know what to do next. Like, how do you keep this community going in Zoom where we used to meet face to face? Somehow I used to start my Photoshop classes. This is long ago, back in Clarkdale in Arizona. I would start my Photoshop classes with asking the students who had an epiphany this week around Photoshop, and would you share that with us? And that was always a great moment in class because the students could get up in front, they could have Photoshop open, and they could show us things that they discovered that maybe weren't part of what we were studying that week, you know? And so it was student driven. It was, I don't know, it always worked. I thought it would be interesting to bring guests in to our learning community and have them share epiphanies around teaching and learning. And so we did. And when you go to this website and you look at some of the people we've had, they are some huge names in teaching and learning. And they're people I knew through Twitter, through the digital storytelling class and other places. But I basically was able to bring in like these keynote speakers for an hour just to sit and talk with 6 or 8 faculty about things that they felt like were really valuable that they'd learned in teaching and learning. And it costs exactly $0. Not that there have been moments where I felt like maybe I was over leveraging kind of asking for more than I should from people. But most people want to share, right? Most people do want, teachers especially, they want to share things they've discovered or things they've done. And so every month, and still to this day, in fact, this Friday, we have 2 faculty from a university in Ireland that are going to be sharing with us. After the next month in March, we have Julia Forsyth, who is the director of the Teaching and Learning Center at Brock University. I mean, really amazing, talented people sitting with us for an hour in like an unscripted storytelling conversation. So that I took this existing community and sort of added something to liven it up. And I guess, that's one thing you definitely can do. This is a friend of mine from back there from Arizona, longtime employee down at the Maricopa schools, Alan Levine. He is probably one of the connecting kind of people. He now lives also not in Arizona. He lives up in Canada. But I feel like while he and I used to bike ride together and hang out physically, now we just talk on the phone. But that's good. And it takes effort to like call, right? You got to pick up the phone. You got to keep those connections alive. And so here's somebody you'll probably recognize. This is Thatcher. He's one of my old colleagues from Arizona. His kids now live up here in Seattle, so he's up in this area pretty frequently. This was taken in Seattle. I am I have been notorious for walking around campus and kind of just walking through faculty offices and bothering them, basically. Uh, I am still rediscovering and forcing myself to ask faculty to go have a coffee, to go meet them somewhere, to go on a bike ride, to go to their offices and just pester them, basically. Um, because I think that's, you know, I can't tell you if you had kids in school, you may remember the Zoom school experience, but whilst this what we're doing right now is truly magical and amazing, I think I think it can be taken to like an extreme where it becomes like I think the worst thing we all learned during COVID as educators was how to use Zoom. I feel like it was kind of the classic, as all technologies are, like this double-edged sword, and it we abused it to a degree. We weren't prepared technically to teach well, many of us, but it just seems like balancing that physical space with our online presence and this tool and doing these things. I need personally to stand with people in time and space, and for me, that's super important. Um, so I go visit people, and I email people I've never met. These are two instructional designers that work at one of the colleges down in Phoenix. I'd never met them. I'm like, hey, I'll come down there to your place and let's have a coffee sometime. And we did. I It was wonderful. I'd never met them before. Um, so that's kind of my things I'm doing to re-find my community. I've moved from Twitter to Mastodon. I still do a lot of Zooming, obviously, but I'm trying to balance that with being more more present in time and space. Um, and so here's the updates. This is fun. So I back in October, I did this same session at the OLC conference, and I made a real point to find and reconnect with people I had known in the past. Um, and that was so nice to sit and chat with them about kids, family, whatever. So that was a win for me because while I had been to some other physical conference, a couple ones here in Washington since COVID, sort the end of the hardcore COVID part, um, this was the first time I really felt like, you know, it was nice 3 days, got to really sit and talk with people. Um, I also, and this is, this goes on. I also sent an email to somebody that I didn't know. Uh, this is the woman here in the upper right. Her name is Natalie, and I didn't know her, but I saw an article that she had written about play and play in education. And it wasn't like for kids play, it was like adult learners play. And I thought, wow, that's great. I'm going to email them and see if they want to chat about this. So I did. Within 2 or 3 weeks, we had come up with this scheme to find some faculty to work together on a project. 9 months later, we had 18 total faculty, nine from, or yeah, nine from here, nine from University of Glasgow, and man, not only did we create this great site, which is linked here. Here, I'll open this because this is pretty fun. So this is what we did. This is in that presentation, but we had all these different things that people created, right? We had a bunch of super nice participants. We made this super simple little website with stuff. In 2 weeks, Natalie and I are presenting that, how that happened at another conference in Canada. But it was wonderful. The person I wrote with, the topic we wanted to write about was like the first 5 minutes of class. That got published in Faculty Focus here just recently, so you can go see that article here. And then lastly, here are like an update from that Pacific Northwest instructional designer thing. I'd never met any of these people. And they showed up to that meeting. So that's my story. I am in the process of like, I feel like professional recovery in a lot of ways. Like it still feels empty. Like yesterday, literally there was nobody in any of those offices that I showed you in that video. And yeah, I am still just like I'm working hard to try to figure out where to go forward. Um, anyway, that's kind of my story. Anybody have questions or comments? I saw somebody said they like to go walk around offices too. That's these days it's very different than it was 6 years ago, right?
Yeah, I like that. And a number of years ago, I had a boss who did the same thing. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon, he'd walk around, touch base with his staff. Sometimes it'd just be, "Hey, how you doing? I'm fine, okay." And he goes on, or sometimes comes in, sits down, we talk about something, and it's casual. Would feel made me feel like I could share anything, and it was okay. And all the staff loved him, and if he didn't come around, we'd be asking each other, "Is Marvin here today? I haven't seen him." And he made a real point of making us really feel part of the same group. And I tried, when I moved on, I tried to do the same thing. And I'd say, "Well, I'm going to go over to the business building, start on the fifth floor and work my way down." And, I would find faculty in the office and I'd say, "Hi, how's it going?" And sometimes they'd have time to chat. I'd learn something. Sometimes it was a faculty member who was teaching for us. And it was a chance for them to informally maybe say they were having an issue that maybe I could help with. And that if I hadn't come by, they probably would have kept quiet about it. So, yeah, COVID made a real difference. It played a big role in my deciding to retire. I
Yeah.
I live for working with people and interacting with them. I get good ideas from them, and I wasn't getting what I needed. And yeah, I got to like being home, not having to go to work, put on a suit and tie, and so
Yeah.
here I am, still doing this. But
It's really fascinating well, as far as the reaching out, almost every time I walk into a faculty office, they will express in some way or another, "Oh, I was going to call you or email you and ask you about something," because they have questions. They're just busy and they forget and they don't. And so being right there in front of them helps with that. Um, yeah, I am definitely trying to figure out the balance between this Zoom possibilities and my physical relationship with my work. And I don't really have any good answers other than some of the things I've tried to do that have been really rewarding. Um,
I have a couple comments. So the picture you showed of Thatcher, he still does that. He walks around campus, goes into people's offices and visits, and he likes to walk around barefoot. So I always give him a hard time about that. But Thatcher is still Thatcher. The the you talked about play and the thing that you did. Bob and I attended a session yesterday on play and fascinating. And that the presenter, what she talked about, how to get students engaged. You talked about the first 5 minutes of class. Um, Carol and I, part of our program, we go and talk about TRIO. We go to different classes and instructors, are okay with us coming into, and then let us talk, right? Talk about TRIO to invite students to come join the program. And to me, it's always fascinating when we walk in those classrooms to see what the instructors are doing. And for me personally, I find the classrooms where the instructors have, say, music playing, something simple like that, the vibe is so different than in other classrooms that there's nothing going on. Everybody, all the students are got their face already in their phone and they're not talking to their neighbor. So that session yesterday but reminded me when you were talking about what you did. That was a really good session. And some of the things that she talked about, I had, experienced at different conferences. So that was good. Now, speaking of the thing about remote work, for me personally, ever since COVID, so Yavapai College now, Carol and I were both advisors. So in the world of advising or in student development, I believe all in student development, we can work 2 days remote, 3 days on campus. For me personally, that is a really nice balance. I like being home. I mean, my husband and I were empty nesters for a while, and then some kids came back. But I found out, I mean, I'm an extrovert, if you haven't figured that out. So COVID was a whole new place for me, but I discovered, you know what? I like being home. I kind of get more done without the distractions of the people because I tend to talk to people about whatever. So for me, the 2 days at home and 3 days on here, and then when we are here in our world anyway, again, because YC says, people have to be on campus 3 days a week. There are plenty of people around. There aren't that many empty offices, even though folks are home 2 days a week. So I've found that to be a nice balance. So just want to share that.
yeah.
I liked being in Zoom. I got heard more in staff meetings and collaborative opportunities. I am not an extrovert like Sarika. So when we were forced to be in Zoom, now I like being at the office too. The students have easier access to me. There's plenty of benefits to it socially and professionally. But yeah, I get more program work done. So building the stuff we have to do for Trio, that's usually on my remote days. But when we had staff meetings and during the COVID lockdowns, we had social hour built into the week by our vice president, which was fabulous because people I never even met in person, never would have met in person. All of a sudden, I'm having conversations with them, and they're like, "Oh, you're kind of cool." So there's that balance too, because some of us are not prone to going and bouncing around like Sareka does to talk to people.
It's funny, yeah, with me, so I'm retired, right? Which,
Yeah. Right.
so long ago it's hard to visualize being retired, but I am. And my wife passed away about 10 years ago. So it's just me and my dog, Molly. So I know it's important for retired people, people my age. I just a few weeks ago turned 72, which I find incredibly hard to believe, but it's important to maintain those social connections.
Yeah.
And Tahlequah is a small town, and COVID hit shortly after I moved here. I really don't know a lot of people here. I know people all over the country. So it's important for somebody like me to socialize. This conference is one way to socialize, and I use technology to stay engaged with family all over the country. Uh, and I make a point to reach out to someone that I haven't, connected with in a long time. And that, so I kind of continued what I was doing when I was working, to still make sure I don't become some, old crusty hermit who yells at people when they walk by on the sidewalk kind of thing.
I also like what you said, Todd, about picking up the phone and making connections. For me personally, ever since COVID, I've discovered the introverted side of me, and I'm just liking that side. So we are in Building 1. Well, Prescott, both of us are in Prescott. I don't know if you remember what Building 1 in Prescott looks like, but we are on the second floor where the learning center is. I used to work downstairs in the, on the front lines and financial aid, and that's where Carol and I both first met when she was working in the UB. I hardly ever go down there. I'm just living on the second floor of Building 1. And I only go down there if I have to go and actually meet with someone or talk with someone. So that's a whole new side of me. But what you said, I found that interesting. I have a son who works for ASU. He works for the University Design Institute, a techie guy, kind of reminds me a lot of you. And he's always telling me about mom. And he makes it a point of calling people and making that connection. Is really good about keeping those. And when you were talking, you reminded me a lot of him. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. You have these techie guys who are very good about picking up the phone and making connection. And he does that. And he gets on my case because maybe it's an age thing. I've gotten away from making those connections. I mean, here's Carol. I haven't even, we usually go out for our birthdays. Our birthdays are a few days apart in November. Didn't get to do it this time. And I still haven't been to a house in months. Exactly. But so I find that interesting. And yet, my son is very good about picking up the phone. When you said that, he literally talks to me about that. Mom, you've got to pick up the phone and talk to people. You can't just text them. So thank you for that reminder.
Hey, decades ago, I was the training coordinator in a hospital. Aside from distance education staff, I was the first training coordinator. They didn't have, up till then, a new employee orientation, which made no sense to me. So I started that. One thing we did that I thought was important, we took a tour of the hospital and met with people. In one place in particular, we had a laundry like way in the bowels of the hospital. And in fact, I was there for a long time before I knew where it was. So I made a point on our tour. We went down to the laundry, had people tell us, how much work they did every day, every week. And I had people from the laundry come to me at lunchtime and say, wow, I really appreciate you bringing it in. Nobody ever talks to us or knows we, even exist. And that was amazing. To try and make connections with people, someday you're going to need somebody for some reason. And if you have a good relationship with you, they'll step up and help you, just like you'll help them because you know them. Anyway, I'm proud. It's one thing I'm really proud of, doing that, having those people say nobody ever even knows where we are.
That's good leadership, I mean, I think that's so I think, and I'll go back to just the concept of having a relationship as opposed to some kind of purely transactional event, right? Like the teacher gives the student the information and we just call it good, right? I think words like trust and whatnot, it's probably because I'm getting older, but I mean, that relationship, the book I put in there by David Cormier is time of abundance, but it's about like, what if those relationships literally were the point? And then we expanded from that place into the world of the information and the stuff, right? Um, yeah. Well, John, I put a link to the presentation in there. That I can't believe the two people here. I can't wait to send. I took a screenshot. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to send it to Thatcher because he's just gonna think that's the greatest. And please, if you see colleagues from 8, 9 years ago that I would know over there, please say hi to them for me. I miss that place a lot. I thought I was going to die with flip-flops, shorts, and a t-shirt on somewhere in the Verde Valley.
Well, Todd, thanks again for doing this.
Yeah.
And
Thank you, Bob. This is
I
great
need to
stuff.
look back to see when it was the last time you did this for us. And
I don't remember what I did, but
yeah, and
I
well,
think we did.
now, it's like 800 of those. I don't remember all of them.
you've done that's
Anyway,
some great work. Really, I really appreciate
I,
this.
I enjoy it. Again, like I said, I enjoy just meeting everyone, but also I learn something and I feel like I'm doing something good. So, hey,
You are doing
The last
something.
thing I was gonna say, Todd, maybe also in the world that you work in, like teaching in TELS, PTSS, or IT, those like even YC, most of our IT department, I think was it last year sometime, they went home. They're 100% remote. So it's very few IT folks here on campus now. Thatcher's department, I think those guys are here, but
They are. Yeah.
they're here, but so maybe that's part of what you're suffering too. It's your arena in general is more now remote than in person.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
I always tried to make friends with the IT folks because they're the ones, if you got a
Always.
problem, you want them to help you right away, not a week and a half later. And so they were integral to my success. So yeah, hey, I'd bring them cookies, donuts, anything, just so we had a good relationship. Okay, well, I'm gonna